We are back with another episode, and we are going to look at franchising. Should I franchise my small business? What does that mean? Or
should I buy a franchise?
should I buy a franchise if I'm looking to expand?
Now, I want to kick this off because there are probably some people that listen to that first bit and they're just like, I'm not interested in franchising. You know, I'm not interested in turning my business into a franchise. Before you tune out, let me tell you this. One of the things that I did early on in my career was I had to take a college course on franchising. And I mean, the whole course wasn't on franchising.
I was going to say, that's a long semester.
Well, the course was on entrepreneurship, and we did a full segment on franchising.
Oh, cool.
And I wasn't super jazzed about it because I'm just like, yeah, franchising. But it really opened up my mind to entrepreneurship as a whole because you got to admit, people that franchises work because they're really well.
Because the small business itself works.
Yeah. And that's what
And then they proved that by repeating it.
I want to focus a lot in on that is you might not be wanting to franchise today, but if you can set up your business to where it's franchisable,
Oh, baby.
that's huge.
Yeah.
And so I want to talk about that, but I also want to talk about the fact that if you're looking to get into business, a quality franchise it's a solid option.
That's not a bad way to go.
It's not a bad way to go. So I think there's a lot that we can talk about and a lot that we can learn as entrepreneurs.
For sure.
Even if that's not in our immediate horizon, it's still a great topic. So we hope that you hang with us because you're going to learn a lot today.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I think first let's start off with talking a little bit about what franchising is. I'm sure that this is basic knowledge to a lot of people, but some people might not know what it is.
Well,
I certainly wasn't aware of the full extent of what it took to franchise and be a franchise. So I kind of want to start there.
So here's the crazy thing. When I was first studying franchises, I kind of just like, oh, okay, you either start your own business or you do a franchise. Like those are your two options, A and B. And we went through and we talked about all of the different things you can do with your business, like licensing. And I looked at it and I'm just like, oh, okay. I mean, I understand licensing, or I understood licensing at the time, and I never really pictured that as a form of business.
Right.
But a lot of times these businesses will grow to a point and then they look at it and they're like, how do I leverage myself? How do I leverage my process that I have put together?
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe you want to license, maybe you want to franchise, maybe you want to sell your business. You know, these are all viable options of, you know, capitalizing on the value of your business. And so,
well, I always thought about this specifically in terms of restaurants, right? I don't know.
It feels like that's where it should go.
Yeah.
Very stereotypical.
I don't know if it came just from McDonald's and that being such a popular case of, you know, figuring out the system and going through the process of taking this fast food restaurant or this restaurant and turning it into a whole fast food chain, right?
Yeah, right.
It's pretty popular example of franchising, but you could franchise anything, right?
Yeah. And so, okay, the idea of franchising is pretty much it's a way to get some quick capital and to leverage other people's interest in your business, their expertise, their financial resources. Because when I buy a franchise, basically, so the owner of a business, you know, I've got a successful business and I want to grow and expand this business. Well, I could grow and expand it myself with my own resources, which at some point are going to cap out. I don't care how deep your pockets are, at some point are going to cap out. Or I can say, hey, why don't you pay for my idea, take my process, my brand, and you launch it in your city, and now all of a sudden I'm leveraging your dollar. And that to me was kind of a game-changing idea when it came to franchising. Is I was with you. You franchise, you know, that means McDonald's.
French fries.
Yeah, that's
chicken
what it
nuggets
is,
and
right?
burgers.
and it's so not. There's there's so much more going on than just than just growing a restaurant. It's leveraging dollars from other people.
And I love how you state that. It's really leveraging, it's taking advantage of that option, right? That's available to small business owners. All small business owners, if you can get your crap together in a really refined way, anybody can franchise, right? And so, and you mentioned earlier that it's not just capital, though capital is a really common way to dive into franchising is, somebody pays you a bunch of money to use your idea. You still own the idea, right? Or you still own the brand or whatever it is, but they're paying you, they're using their financial resources to have access to that.
Grow your brand.
But like you mentioned, there are other options. Mm-hmm. You don't have to take on financial resources in order to, or you don't have to have that as your only, that's not your only option for leveraging resources, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, I want to back up before we get too far ahead of ourselves. And, we mentioned that you can franchise just about anything.
Like a paper mill.
Sure. I'm going to franchise a paper mill.
I love that example because it's like...
It's a horrible example. I was going to say, what was that? Like 7 episodes that you introduced the paper mill?
Yeah.
I'm like, what the crap? Berkshire Hathaway it was a paper mill, I believe.
Really?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah. So
that's gnarly.
Warren Buffett, he invested in Berkshire Hathaway. They kind of went under.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And he ended up basically buying them out.
Yeah.
And that's where the whole like he didn't intend to necessarily own this paper mill and create this company from it, right. But he ended up buying them out because he invested in them and they went under, and then he bought the company and took it over,
turned it around.
So there you go, paper mill.
It's not a bad example. Just kidding. It's still a bad example.
So I would recommend, if you've never really looked at what is available to be franchised, there's a website that I personally like, Frannet, FRANNET.com. And when I say I like this, there are other sources out there. They're not the only ones that do this. This is just the one that that I'm kind of familiar with. And when I went in and looked at their list of franchises, I was kind of blown away. And it broadened my perspective to the fact that, anything can be franchised. And so, if I'm a business owner and I'm looking at my business, one of the questions I want to ask myself is, can I franchise my business? Can I license my business? Are there ways for me to profit off of my business that don't involve me selling my direct goods or services?
And as a small business, am I to that level, right? You have to be to a certain level of performance to be able to consider that as an option, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, if I were to go out and be like, hey, Atlanta Hawks, I want to play on your guys' team, they would laugh at me because I'm not that level of athletic, right?
Right.
I mean, I do some pretty cool stuff. I can play sports. I can catch a ball pretty well and whatever, but I'm definitely not to that level. I don't have my crap together in that way, right?
Yeah. And so that's one of the things that I want to talk about here for a second is, how do you get your business to that level? Whether you're going to franchise or not, how do you get your business to that level?
Yeah, and what questions should you be asking yourself to know whether or not you're ready?
And I want to start with this whole idea of the process.
Perfect.
What is your process? How repetitive is your business? And you brought up McDonald's. McDonald's does not have the best hamburger in the world. There are so many better hamburgers out there. Why is McDonald's so successful? Because they have one of the best processes in the world.
Yeah.
Food is difficult to be consistent. And yet they have such a dialed-in process that they create consistent hamburgers worldwide, very minor deviation, if at all, and it can all be run by pretty much, a bunch of teenagers that, high school kids that are able to manage this restaurant. I mean, that's a dialed-in process. Yeah. And I'm being somewhat facetious. There is more to, the McDonald's franchise than that. But the idea is that the process is so smooth that everyone knows how it works. Whether you are in Tennessee or whether you are in the UK, it doesn't matter. Oh, yeah. You know how the process works.
Yeah. So I was in Germany, and we were in this downtown area, and we came across some fast food restaurants that I recognized, McDonald's being one of them. And I was like, no way. And I just had to go in just to see what it was like. Was this the same restaurant that I had been to back in my home state in America, right? Mm-hmm. So I walk in, sure enough, same colors, same types of, seating and tables and same menus and same freaking hamburgers. And it's like, same uniforms, same freaking everything. It's like, that's creepy that they're following me. Just kidding. They're not following me, but that they're that, they have that broad of a reach, and it's the exact same. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But so, if you as a small business can identify, like you said, identify this step-by-step process, it's got to be very clear and very simple, right? You've got to know exactly the details of each step of this process and be able to walk through it time and time again and have the same outputs, whatever that is, whether that's hamburgers or whether that's widgets or whether that's a service, whatever. Mm-hmm. You've got to that's got to be replicable.
Right. Absolutely. Now, I'm going to back up for just a second.
Sure.
Because something was not setting well with me. Berkshire Hathaway was a cotton textile mill, not a paper mill.
Oh.
I apologize. I had to fact check myself because when I was talking, I'm like, wait a second, I don't think it was paper. So I apologize for that.
And I totally bought into it. I was like, oh yeah, I remember that now.
Well, and that's what I was thinking.
It sounded familiar, for sure.
It was a mill. I mean, I wasn't like, they didn't do space exploration and I'm calling them a paper mill.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So, okay. This process.
So what is
I'm just
I know.
Whoop.
Bing, 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 bing. Pinball.
I know.
So what do our small business owners that are listening, our entrepreneurs that are listening, they have a process that are like, yeah, that sounds familiar. Maybe they need to tweak some things to get that dialed in. Let's start there. How do they go about identifying areas in their process to become more efficient?
So this is the easiest test in the world, but it's kind of a scary test to do. Pull yourself out of the equation. If you're the business owner, pull yourself out of the equation. Hand someone the instruction manual, whether that's your standard operating procedures, whether that is, you've got a, kind of like a workflow process, whether that is the employee handbook, whatever your process is, pull yourself out of the equation and allow someone to operate strictly off of the information that is contained in that handbook.
Or pile of sticky notes.
I mean, picture this.
That happens, though.
Right. It's your daughter's birthday, and she wanted a doll house for her birthday. I had this happen a couple years back, and I opened up the instruction. It was pretty extensive, but the instructions were so well written. It's take item J, stick it in, connect it to
an item J is labeled.
Yeah.
Right?
And at the end, I was able to build this beautiful dollhouse because the instructions were there. But in our business, we think the instructions are there. But what happens when it's like, well, boss, what do I do? Oh, you do this. Isn't that obvious?
Yeah, I've told you that before.
Someone's like, well, wait a second. I thought we did it this way. Oh, yeah, we do it that way, you know? And that is more common of what happens. And I'll tell you what, if you're trying to franchise, and if your instruction manual is haphazard or, fly by the seat of your pants,
or if there's room for deviation, right?
Oh yeah.
Like, to me, that's a big one. Because everybody's different, right? People are going to want to do things their own way, and they're going to want to experiment or try something or say, you know what, I think I know a little bit better. I'm going to do this way. That's not what we're after here. We are after do X, add in Y, it equals Z. Period. End of story. Don't change anything. Don't do Y first and then X. Nothing gets switched around. We're doing this exactly the same way.
Yeah.
And
we just did an episode on how boring success can be.
That's it.
Because it's like, kill the creativity. But honestly, there are aspects of your business where you can be creative, but process should not be one of those.
Yeah.
And
in fact, I think it's my firm belief that process opens up the availability and opportunity to be creative in a small business.
Ooh, that's deep. I'm going to make you expand on that.
I think we need a whole other episode for that, but I will touch on it lightly. If you have this great idea as an entrepreneur, you're going to provide this widget to the world, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to manufacture it and ship it out, right? So you get your process dialed in. Now all of a sudden you can apply all of your energy into replicating that in different ways, through your marketing channels. All of a sudden it's like, hey, can we come up with a marketing process to specifically dial in how to sell this product, right? Mm-hmm. When we take this widget, we do X to the masses, whether that's social media or demonstrations or whatever, we get Y. And if you can dial that in, all of a sudden you become unstoppable, right? Because essentially that's what Coca-Cola does. They don't sell the bottles of Coke anymore. They sell the syrup, right? Yeah. That's insane. When I learned that, it was like my mind was blown, because it was like, they're not even selling their end product. They don't sell their end product. They sell it to people who bottle it up and distribute it and sell it from there. Mm-hmm. Because they found that that's the best way to dial in their process. They can repeat that time and time again, and they can scale those results. And that's what I'm talking about. I'm kind of all over the map here, but
let me give you an example of an experience that I had, and I think this will kind of tie in what you're explaining. So I had an opportunity once to come into a company. Their sales team was struggling quite a bit in trying to figure out how they were going to grow their sales. And so when I went in and I sat down with the management team and I sat down with the sales team and I said, look, you guys are kind of all over the board, and this is what is killing your sales growth. And immediately they fired back with, it was one guy in particular on the sales team, and he's like, you're going to kill all of my creativity. You're going to make it so I can't do anything. You're just coming and trying to clip my wings. And I mean, he was pretty vocal about this, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, look, I get where that's coming from. I understand. That's not at all what's happening here. I need you guys to trust that this is really going to liberate you, not restrict you. So they were willing to give it time. And I told them, I said, you've got to give it time. I asked for 6 months.
Yeah.
And they agreed to 6 months. And so they said, okay, we'll give it 6 months. And so for that 6 month period, we went through and we just worked on process. And right at first, oh man, people were not happy.
Oh yeah.
But then, and I remember when this guy came up to me and he's like, this is at the end of the 6 months. He's like, I learned something. What was that? He said, I was spending most of my days doing things that I was cleaning up messes.
Yeah.
And I didn't enjoy cleaning up messes. And I could never get to what I really enjoyed because I had to spend so much time cleaning up messes. Now, I had all the creativity and all the flexibility in the world to clean up these messes, but it was still cleaning up messes. Once we put this process in place, it eliminated the messes so I could put my creative juices toward coming up with new sales strategies, going after new customers, the things that actually are most appealing to me in my job. And so that was a big moment for me. I really, I really enjoyed that moment. But it also iterates this concept of, a process is liberating. It's very liberating.
And I think that a lot of people, so I really like how you mentioned that at first they weren't having it, right? Like this was a struggle to get everybody on the bus. Because I think that initially that's everybody's got feeling is like, no, I don't like, kind of like you're alluding to. I don't want the process. Process sucks. Process is boring. It's not going to work. Blah, 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 blah. All the complaints kind of come out, right?
Right.
But once, like you said, once you get those out of the way, once the understanding is there that it's not taking anything away, it's just putting those pieces together in, for me, it's like a game kind of. Like if I can dial this in, like if I can do this a little bit better, I can beat my time. I can, I get a personal record, I can whatever. And it's like you get down to that and all of a sudden you're performing this task or you're providing your widget or, this process is happening in a phenomenally efficient way. And then you can keep doing that because you have it already dialed in, but then you can start doing something else and you can apply that same vigor and creativity to something else. Like I said, like marketing or whatever. And once you start to kind of get those things dialed in, experimenting and coming up with more efficient ways to do this and that and the other, all of a sudden you become exquisitely efficient and franchisable and scalable. And there is a lot of money to be made in scaling up.
Well, and okay, so I want to take what you're talking about and I want to look at it from the other side. We've talked a lot about making your business franchisable and the importance of doing that. But I want to talk about, should I purchase someone else's franchise?
Okay.
There are a ton of entrepreneurs out there who they look at it and they say, boring. I don't want to follow someone else's process. And as we're talking about, that can actually be a liberating experience. If someone has already done the dirty work, if they figured out what sells,
exactly,
you might want to be the person who purchases that secret recipe from them. And then, you just cook. And so, I look at my style of cooking in the kitchen and my wife's style of cooking in the kitchen. She loves to follow the recipe because she figures, look, someone took a lot of time to figure out what tastes good. They came up with the ratios. They already did the trial and error.
Yeah.
And so she wants to follow the recipe. Me, I look at recipes as guidelines. I'm like, it gives me some ideas, kind of, helps me go in a direction, but I'm going to blaze my own trail.
That's how I look at the painted lines on the road.
Wow.
They're just guidelines.
I feel safe.
Right? They're different colors to keep my attention.
Right.
That's it.
And so, when I cook, sometimes I come up with things that are amazing, but sometimes I come up with things that are less than palatable.
Describes my driving as well.
And my wife is consistent. Like her stuff always tastes good. And so I look at franchises, I'm like, if someone else has figured out the recipe, maybe you could just follow it. And not all franchises are great franchises. Some of them are amazing. Some of them are not. You have to do your homework.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
There's a reason why it costs so much and takes so much time to be able to get into a McDonald's franchise. Right. Some of those other big names in restaurants, and granted, we're talking a lot about restaurants, but there's a reason why
your bigger, better franchises,
they have a bigger barrier to entry. There's a reason for that.
Yes. Yeah. Now, I want to talk about that barrier to entry, and there's a lot of content here, but we're at the end of our episode, so this will be the final piece that I want to wrap up with, and that is leveraging the information from the barrier to entry that you can use in your own business. That was a really complicated way to say you can learn a lot by how much they're charging for the franchise.
Yep, that's what I was just gonna say.
I was looking at your face, and as I was talking, like you're giving me this look of, like word vomit was coming out, and you're just no stop. So
I'm glad you clarified. Thank you.
So if you go on, any franchise, they will have the purchase price of the franchise. They will also have the capital investment that you are required to have up front for that franchise. And most novice entrepreneurs are going to look at those numbers and they're going to think to themselves, whoa, these are really big. I can do this better on my own. You can't. This is a dialed-in process. They have taken the time to figure out how much it costs and how much capital you need in the bank to be successful.
Yep.
These numbers came from lots of people figuring this out in lots of different markets. And so if you go and look at a franchise, and that franchise is, like you want to do a fitness franchise, and you're like, oh my goodness, they want $20,000, and then they're going to require that I have another $50,000 in capital. I'm going to go start my own gym, and all I need is $15,000. I'm like, no. They're not charging that much for their brand.
Right.
Most of that money is literally what it costs to start that gym.
Because there are a lot of other factors that go into this, right? Mm-hmm. Like they've done their market research, they've done their homework. They know that they have to have a certain level of quality of equipment, for example. Like if one of the things you're thinking is, I could just get cheaper equipment. Maybe that's the breaker or the deal breaker between it working and it not working.
Right. Yeah. And so franchises have done their homework. Learn from that. Do your homework. There are bad franchises out there. There are bad deals that you don't want to take. And if you are unsure or if you don't know, just slow down, take some time, learn what you're doing first.
Yeah.
It's like anything in life. It's like if you rush into it, well, don't be surprised when it's not what you thought it was. Don't marry the first girl that you ever go on a date with.
Yeah. Figure out what you're looking at.
Yeah.
Right.
And so but there's a lot to be learned from franchises. So even if you're not interested in franchising, there's a lot of value in learning about franchises to help you do better with your business. And I guess that's kind of what I want to wrap up with today is just, take those opportunities to learn, do your homework, slow down a little bit, put that process in place. These are all great things for your business.
Yeah. Challenge yourself and try to figure out a way to do things better and more efficiently, even if you're not thinking of franchising, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hope you enjoy this episode. We will catch you next time. Again, we are at marketingmanagementmoney.com. If you want to reach us, that is Ryan at marketingmanagementmoney.com.